All right, welcome back. Let's dive right into this one. We're going to be finishing off the body. As you can see, it is now free of paint. I did a little bit while you guys were away. I just finished smoothing out that little corner piece that I took off there. And then also, some of you may have noticed, there was a little fill-in right there. It's got this channel, and for whatever reason they decided to block the channel off at the end right there. So I have since gone through and used a series of small files and just ground the rest of that channel out. Another thing that I noticed, as we mentioned on the last episode, is the vents are a little bit screwy. This is one thing that I'm not going to be able to change on this model, unfortunately. The vents right here and here aren't quite correct. The lower vents are supposed to be as wide as the upper vents, and they're supposed to start just a little bit lower. And to compound that, these two angles right here aren't supposed to be as extreme as they are. But sometimes there are things on the model that I gotta just let go because the amount of time that it's gonna take to fix them isn't really gonna be worth the little amount of detail. This part of the model is gonna get painted black anyways, so the vents, unless they were translucent or unless you could see through them, it wouldn't really matter. So I'm gonna let that one slide. All right, so let's tease this guy out of here. Just gonna break the glue contact. Whenever you have glue on top of paint, it's usually pretty easy to do that. Where you get in trouble is when you have like plastic glued to plastic. It's not always going to be easy to break that contact without damaging the model. And there's always a risk of breaking the contact when it's paint on top of glue or glue on top of paint. But let's see what we can do here. Gently tease it out. I'm not too concerned if I break the tabs on the bottom, because this is just going to get glued back in place. So I got that out. Next part is these. It has been glued here, and I did come in already and start loosening it up a bit. I'll just try to tease those guys out. First one out. Pop. And here we go. These things are actually made out of rubber. It's kind of funny. I guess it just made it easier to install them. Alright, we'll set that off to the side. With this part, like I said, I'm not going to reuse this. The way this was attached was to little nodes on the side of the hydraulic. That's all going adios. We'll redo that out of brass tubing later. So just pull this out. Not really concerned with preserving it. Might be easier just to push it from the back. And I guess this is a decision you have to make for yourself when you're doing building. That's why these projects have such a varied level of skill, and you shouldn't be afraid of getting into custom building. If you wanted, you could leave this completely the way it is. I'm just stripping it down because that's my style, and because I'm also going to be changing some of this, and I obviously have to add that brass piece to help the part that we broke. I'm going to change up my style a little bit here. A lot of times I like to start grinding before I remove the paint, just because it gives me reference points, but I'm going to remove the paint first on this one, simply because I don't really need any reference points on this. So, put in a little bucket here. It's just, I think this had lunch meat in it. Just a nice little container, and lately I've been digging this stuff. It's a, zoom out here a bit. Kind of a, I guess they call it biodegradable. You can use it indoors basically. Make sure you follow all of your state regulations in regards to disposing of any sort of waste. Just because it's biodegradable doesn't mean that your municipality is okay with you putting it down the drain. Stuff smells like a smoothie. Nice orange flavor to it. Almost smells like that orange floor cleaner. Just drizzle it on there. I need to get more of this stuff. It's nice and viscous, which makes it easy to brush on. Alright, so I'm going to let this stuff sit for a little bit, then we'll come back to it. Alright, so while the stripper is doing its job, you want to see my dance moves? we're going to do a little bit more detailing. Let's drill this out, drill that out for the gas cap, and then this line right there needs to be added. Tried using the bandsaw for that first cut. Not as successful as I would have liked it to have been because of the height that I had to use. The blade went kind of wah wah wah, so I ended up not getting a very well defined cut. So I'm going to try to do it with the handsaw here instead. Alright, method number 3. Let's try this out. Create a little brass guide here so the blade won't wander as much. Nice. That's exactly what I needed. Go for a little bit of a thicker blade so I can try to match this up with the same size as the other grooves that are on the model. It's time to put in the holes for all the brass that I'm going to be using for the gas filler and the exhaust, and then also putting in the hole for the air filter. This spot will be the mounting point for the mirror that I'm going to build. Alright, so I believe that I am done with all of the cutting and drilling for the body. Well, except for one more hole. We'll go on later for a grab rail. But got all the top ones done. And this panel line came out okay. Could have come out better. I think in the future I should definitely do my practice cuts on a piece of scrap before trying it on the model that I'm going to build. We could address that later with a little bit of filler. I think it came out decent. Alright, so let's do a quick education on Caterpillar cabs offered in the mid-90s and the early 2000s. These would be the cabs equipped on the 300 and 300B series excavators. A lot of the cab's design has to do with where the machine was produced, and there are 3 different cab origins. There's Japanese produced machines. They have a different cab than machines that were produced in the US, and they have a different cab than machines that were produced in Europe, most specifically France and Belgium. I'm sure I'm missing a couple other places, but here we go. So this cab right here on the 345 is the American produced cab. This is the cab that was introduced in about 1996 and was used till about the early 2000s, I think 2003 or 2006, for the 345. This cab was also used on the 25, the 30, the 65, and a few other models. The easiest way to tell this cab from the very similar Belgian cab that you can see here on the 5080 is both the paint and some of the panel lines for the cab. So the American cab has a much more rounded top to the rear quarter window, whereas the Belgian cab has a much more angular shape to the top of the rear quarter window. And also the American cabs were only painted yellow in this area, whereas the whole front of the cab wore a black mask. The roof should have a skylight here, and then paint here would be yellow. The same scheme would apply to the Belgian sourced cab. And then there's the Japanese sourced cab that you can see here on this model. The easiest way to tell the Japanese sourced cabs from the other ones is this window is a little bit bigger, or it sticks out a little bit farther than the lower quarter window, and the lower quarter window doesn't have that angle at the top like this cab does and like the Belgian cab does. And also the rear quarter window on the Japanese cab is a little bit smaller. Now the early American cabs, the US produced cabs, were the same as the Japanese cab, but that, like we stated earlier, was changed in 1996. There's also another cab that I don't have, and it is the one that was used on the very early Caterpillar 350 and 375s that were produced in US. If you want to see an example of that cab, you can look at the Joel 375 model. Alright, now it's time to begin adding detail to this cab. It may seem counterproductive to be taking detail off of this model, but it's actually all incorrect and inaccurate detail. They had a gasket going around the front window as if it was a fixed window. It's not, so we're going to be removing the incorrect detail. It'll all make sense later. I'll add this part back in later. I just think that it's too heavy of a detail, so it needs to be a little bit finer. I think this forward bar is a bit heavy and out of scale as well. We'll redo that when we install the window. Alright guys, that's all she wrote for this episode. The cab is done. Let's go over what we did real quick here. Removed that bar that's supposed to simulate the sliding window. We'll take care of that later. Removed the front one that's supposed to simulate the split glass. We'll take care of that again later. And then I redid the rear upper portion of the cab here. And then we added the skylight in the front. Alright, well I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I'll get back at you next week when we continue on with the rest of the project. Have a good week and I'll talk to you guys later.